The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the human delegation entered. Admiral Thane Karath of the Zenthari Empire leaned forward in his crystalline seat, his four eyes studying the strange bipedal creatures that had somehow managed to defeat three minor systems in the Outer Rim. What caught his attention wasn't the stern-faced adults in their pristine uniforms, but the small figure walking confidently among them. She couldn't have been more than 12 cycles old by any civilized species standards. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore what appeared to be a child's version of a human military uniform. The other delegates, massive Kron warriors, elegant Etherean mystics, and cold mechanoid representatives, barely glanced at her. To them, she was clearly just some human youngster brought along for reasons they couldn't fathom. Honored Council, the lead human diplomat began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. We present our military advisor for the territorial dispute resolution. Several delegates chuckled. The Zenthari admiral's mandibles clicked in amusement. A military advisor who looked like she should be playing with dolls rather than discussing interstellar warfare? These humans were either incredibly naive or suffering from some collective madness. The girl stepped forward, her small boots clicking against the polished floor. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, carrying an authority that seemed impossible for someone so young. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, I am Commander Sarah Chun of the Human Expeditionary Force. I understand there are concerns about humanity's recent expansion into contested space. Admiral Karatha's laugh was like the grinding of stone. Child, return to your nursery. The adults have business to conduct. Sarah's eyes never left his as she pulled out a small datapad. Admiral Karath, commanding the 7th Zenthari Battle Fleet. 43 victories, 12 defeats. Your tactical preference for overwhelming frontal assault has served you well against technologically inferior opponents. The chamber grew quieter. How did this child know his military record? Your most recent engagement, Sarah continued, consulting her pad, was the siege of Kepler Station. You lost 37 ships because you failed to account for the station's hidden defense platforms. A simple reconnaissance sweep would have revealed them. Karatha's mandibles stopped clicking. That information was classified at the highest levels. How do you know about your military failures? Sarah's smile was neither cruel nor kind, simply matter of fact. Because understanding your enemies is the first rule of warfare, Admiral. And make no mistake, anyone who threatens human colonies becomes our enemy. The Etherean delegate, a graceful being of pure energy barely contained in a crystalline shell, spoke with a voice like wind chimes. Surely you cannot be serious. This infant commanding your forces? I've been commanding human forces since I was 8, Sarah replied calmly. The Outer Rim conflicts were merely practice exercises. The silence that followed was deafening. Practice exercises? The humans had just referred to 3 full-scale military campaigns that had resulted in the subjugation of entire systems as practice exercises. And they claimed this child had been running them? Commander Vex of the Kron hegemony slammed his massive fist on his desk, causing several smaller delegates to jump. Impossible. The Kron are the greatest warriors in the galaxy. No mere child could defeat the legendary Kron death squads. Sarah interrupted. The same death squads that surrendered after losing 60% of their forces in the Titan Nebula? Commander Vex, your warriors are brave, but predictable. You charge straight ahead, relying on superior armor and weapons. It works against most species, but not against humans who actually think before they fight. Vex's face turned darker shades of purple. You dare insult the Kron military tradition? I'm not insulting it, Sarah said, her tone patient, as if explaining something to a particularly slow student. I'm simply stating facts. Your military doctrine hasn't evolved in 3 centuries. You've become complacent, relying on reputation rather than innovation. The mechanoid delegate's optical sensors whirred as they focused on Sarah. When Unit Prime 7742 spoke, its voice was a perfect synthesis of electronic tones. Query: What gives humans the right to claim territory already designated for mechanoid expansion? Sarah turned to face the robotic entity. The same right you claimed when you began expanding. Unit Prime 7742. The right of superior capability. She paused, tilting her head slightly. Though, I notice your expansion has been rather limited since encountering human resistance. The chamber erupted in angry chatter. The idea that this slip of a girl was casually dismissing the military might of the galaxy's major powers was absurd. Yet there was something in her demeanor, a quiet confidence that suggested she was not merely boasting. Admiral Karoth rose from his seat, his massive frame towering over the council chamber. Enough of this farce. Child, you may have impressed some minor system governors with clever tricks, but you face the full might of the Zenthri Empire. We have conquered half the galaxy. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Yes, you have an impressive record, Admiral. 17-star systems under direct Zenthri control, with 12 more paying tribute. Your fleet numbers approximately 4,000 ships of various classes. Karoth blinked his 4 eyes in surprise. Those numbers were accurate to within a margin of error. However, Sarah continued, your empire is overstretched. You're dealing with 3 separate rebellion movements, your supply lines are vulnerable, and your officer corps has become corrupt and inefficient. Most importantly, you've never faced an enemy that could match your technological capabilities while exceeding your tactical flexibility. And you believe the humans are such an enemy? The question came from Delegate Zyron of the Trade Federation, a species known for their political cunning rather than military prowess. I don't believe it, Sarah replied simply. I know it, because unlike every other species in this chamber, humans don't just adapt to war. We evolve because of it. Every conflict makes us stronger, smarter, more dangerous. She gestured to her data pad, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing detailed tactical analyses of recent battles. The Siege of Proxima Base, she began, highlighting one engagement. Zenthri forces expected a traditional defensive strategy. Instead, human forces evacuated the base entirely, allowed the enemy to occupy it, then retook it using the Zenthri's own defensive systems against them. The display shifted to another battle. The Kron assault on Mining Station Alpha 7. Rather than meet your death squads in direct combat, human forces collapsed the asteroid's internal structure, creating a maze that negated your warriors' advantages while maximizing ours. A third display appeared, the mechanoid probe into the Vegas system. You expected logical, efficient resistance. Instead, you got chaos theory, apparently random defensive patterns that were actually precisely calculated to exploit gaps in your predictive algorithms. Admiral Karoth studied the displays with growing unease. Each engagement showed the same pattern. Human forces refusing to fight on their enemies' terms, instead creating entirely new paradigms that their opponents couldn't adapt to quickly enough. Clever tactics, he admitted grudgingly, but tactics alone don't win wars. Numbers matter. Resources matter. The Zenthri Empire could field 10 ships for every one in your fleet. Sarah's smile widened slightly. Could you, Admiral? Your intelligence suggests humanity controls, perhaps, 20 worlds. In reality, we've established colonies on over 300 planets across 57 systems. The chamber fell silent again. 300 planets? The humans have been in space for less than 2 centuries. How is such expansion possible? Impossible, breathed the Etherian delegate. Our long-range sensors would have detected such massive colonization efforts. Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect, Sarah replied. Stealth technology, hidden bases, false sensor readings. Humans excel at deception when necessary. We've been preparing for this moment since we first learned we weren't alone in the universe. Unit Prime 7742's optical array flashed rapidly as it processed this information. Query: if human capabilities are as extensive as claimed, why reveal this information now? Because, Sarah said, her young face taking on an expression of absolute seriousness, we're tired of playing games. Humanity has tried peaceful coexistence, diplomatic negotiation, and strategic withdrawal. None of these approaches have prevented continued aggression against human interests. She gestured again, and the displays shifted to show star maps with marked territories. As of today, humanity is claiming sovereignty over all systems within a 50 light-year radius of Earth. Any military vessels found within this boundary without explicit human permission will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Delegates leaped from their seats, voices raised in protest and outrage. The claimed territory included dozens of inhabited systems belonging to various galactic powers. Through the chaos, Admiral Karatha's voice cut like a blade. You cannot seriously believe you can enforce such a claim. The combined fleets of this council could crush any resistance. Sarah waited for the noise to die down before responding. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute certainty. Admiral, 3 days ago, you ordered a probe of the Tau Ceti system to test human defenses. Your task force consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and, for battleships, a significant force by any measure. Karatha's expression darkened. That mission was classified beyond top secret. How did this child know about it? Your ships never returned, Sarah continued matter-of-factly. In fact, they never even reached the system. They were intercepted and destroyed approximately 6 light-years from their target. The Admiral's mandibles began clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. Impossible. Those ships had the best sensors, the strongest shields, had Admiral. Past tense. Sarah's tone remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. 16 ships destroyed without managing to transmit a single distress signal. No wreckage found, no survivors recovered. They simply disappeared. The chamber was now dead silent. Every delegate understood the implications. If the humans could make an entire task force vanish without a trace, what else were they capable of? Commander Vex's voice was quieter now, but still defiant. Even if true, you are still outnumbered thousands to one. The Kron alone could field 1,000,000 warriors. Numbers, Sarah mused, as if considering the concept for the first time. Yes, numbers are important. Shall we discuss numbers, Commander? She gestured to her pad again, and new displays appeared showing troop strength assessments. The Kron hegemony maintains approximately 1.2 million active warriors across 43 systems. The Zinthri Empire fields roughly 800,000 troops with support from auxiliary forces, totaling another 2.3 million. The mechanoids operate with approximately 500,000 active units, though their manufacturing capacity could theoretically produce more. Every number was precise, classified information that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. Combined with the forces of the 12 minor powers represented here, Sarah continued, the total military strength opposing humanity numbers roughly 6 million active combatants supported by various fleet elements totaling approximately 40,000 ships. She paused, looking around the chamber with those disconcertingly mature eyes. Impressive numbers, she admitted. However, they're based on several flawed assumptions. First, that your various species would actually cooperate in a meaningful way rather than pursuing individual agendas. Second, that your forces are currently at peak readiness rather than dealing with the various internal conflicts I mentioned. And third, her smile returned, and somehow was more unsettling than any threat. That humanity has been honest about our actual capabilities. The silence stretched for long moments before Delegate Zyron found his voice. What are you saying, child? I'm saying that everything you know about humanity is wrong, Sarah replied simply. We're not the naive newcomers you think we are. We're not the technologically inferior species struggling to find our place in galactic society. We are apex predators who have been studying you, learning from you, and preparing to surpass you since the day we learned you existed. She stood straighter, and, despite her small stature, she suddenly seemed to dominate the enormous chamber. Humanity doesn't want war, she continued. War is expensive, unpredictable, and wasteful of resources that could be better used for exploration and growth. But if war is forced upon us, the displays shifted again, showing what appeared to be massive fleet formations in deep space. We will prosecute it with a thoroughness that will make your historical conflicts look like children's games. Admiral Karath stared at the tactical displays, his military mind automatically analyzing the formations shown. The ship designs were unlike anything in his databases, sleek, angular vessels that seemed to blend seamlessly with the darkness of space. More disturbing were the numbers. If the displays were accurate, humanity possessed not hundreds but thousands of warships. Fabrications, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Holographic deceptions meant to intimidate us. Sarah shrugged. Believe what you like, Admiral. The truth will reveal itself soon enough. She looked around the chamber one final time. Humanity extends one final offer of peaceful coexistence. Respect our territorial claims, cease all hostile actions against human interests, and we can all prosper together. Refuse. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The Galactic Council had gathered to deal with what they assumed was a minor territorial dispute with an upstart species. Instead, they found themselves facing a calm, confident child who spoke of military capabilities that shouldn't exist and territorial claims that encompassed half their known space. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Sarah turned back to address the stunned silence. You have 72 hours to respond to our proposal. After that, we'll assume you've chosen war. The chamber doors sealed behind the departing humans with a sound like finality itself. In the silence that followed, the greatest military minds in the galaxy tried to process what they had just heard. A human child, had just delivered what amounted to an ultimatum to the entire galactic community. The most terrifying part wasn't her words or her impossible knowledge of classified information. It was the absolute confidence in her young eyes, the certainty that humanity would emerge victorious from any conflict that followed. For the first time in their military careers, these battle-hardened veterans found themselves wondering if they had gravely underestimated their new enemy. And as reports began filtering in of ships disappearing throughout the galaxy, ships sent to probe human defenses, that wondering began to turn into something none of them had felt in decades. Fear. The 72 hours passed, intense deliberation across the galaxy. Emergency sessions convened on every major world as leaders debated humanity's ultimatum. Some voices urged caution, pointing to the mysterious disappearances of probe ships and the child's unsettling confidence. Others demanded immediate military action, insisting that allowing a primitive species to dictate terms would destroy the galactic order. In the end, pride won over prudence. Admiral Karath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Zinthari Dreadnought Worldbreaker, watching as the largest military force in galactic history assembled around him. 2,000 ships from 7 different species, representing the combined might of civilizations that had conquered stars while humans were still discovering fire. Surely no force, regardless of technological advantages, could stand against such overwhelming numbers. The child's words echoed in his mind, despite his efforts to dismiss them. Her calm certainty, the precise intelligence she possessed, the way she spoke of human capabilities as established facts rather than boastful claims. But she was still just a child, and children often confused imagination with reality. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, long-range sensors detect the human fleet at coordinates 77 Mark IV. How many ships? Karath asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Sensors show approximately 50 vessels, sir. Mostly smaller craft, though there appear to be several larger command ships. Relief flooded through the bridge crew. 50 ships against 2,000? The humans had clearly been bluffing about their capabilities. Perhaps the missing probe ships had suffered mechanical failures or been caught in some natural phenomenon. Signal the fleet, Karath commanded. We advance in formation Beta 7. This ends today. What the Zen-3 sensors didn't detect were the 300 stealth ships positioned throughout the system, their advanced cloaking technology rendering them invisible to conventional detection methods. Nor did they register the massive orbital platforms that have been deployed in the asteroid belt, disguised as ordinary space rocks, but bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Aboard the human flagship Indomitable, Commander Sarah Chun stood in the center of a command bridge that looked nothing like the cramped, inefficient designs favored by other species. Holographic displays surrounded her, showing real-time positions of every ship in both fleets, while quantum communication links provided instant coordination with human forces throughout the galaxy. "Ma'am," reported her tactical officer, a grizzled veteran who'd stopped questioning his young commander's abilities after the first few impossible victories. "Enemy fleet is advancing as predicted. They're maintaining tight formation, maximizing their numerical advantage." Sarah nodded, her young face serene as she studied the tactical displays. "They're thinking like Zen-3, not like humans." Admiral Karath expects a traditional engagement, ship against ship, firepower against firepower. He can't conceive of any other way to fight. She gestured to the communications officer. "Signal all ships. Execute pattern Omega." The visible human fleet suddenly scattered, breaking formation in what appeared to be panic. Several ships even began retreating toward the edge of the system. On the enemy flagship, Karatha's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "They're running," his tactical officer reported excitedly. "The humans are fleeing." "Pursue them," Karath ordered. "Don't let a single ship escape. Today, we show the galaxy what happens to species that threaten their betters." The Allied fleet surged forward, abandoning their careful formation as individual commanders raced to claim the glory of destroying human ships. The disciplined advance became a chaotic charge as species-old rivalries surfaced and coordination broke down. It was exactly what Sarah had been counting on. "Now," she said quietly. The space around the pursuing fleet erupted in controlled chaos. Stealth ships decloaked directly behind enemy vessels, their weapons already charged and targeted. The disguised orbital platforms revealed themselves, energy lances reaching across impossible distances to spear through holes designed to withstand conventional weaponry. But the real surprise came from the fleeing human ships themselves. What had appeared to be a retreat was actually a complex redeployment, positioning each vessel for maximum effectiveness. As the enemy fleet found itself scattered and surrounded, the humans demonstrated why they had conquered half a continent while their planet was still racked by primitive warfare. Humanity didn't just fight battles, they orchestrated them like deadly symphonies. On the Worldbreaker's bridge, alarms screamed as systems failed throughout the ship. A human vessel barely a tenth their size had somehow penetrated their shields and was systematically dismantling their weapons arrays with surgical precision. "Impossible," Karath roared. "Our shields should stop anything they can throw at us." His chief engineer's voice was tight with panic. "Sir, their weapons aren't trying to overcome our shields. They're synchronizing with our shield frequency and passing right through them. That's impossible. Shield frequencies are randomized every nanosecond." "Yes, sir, but somehow they're predicting the randomization pattern." Throughout the fleet, similar scenes played out as human technology demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't exist. Ships that could phase through solid matter to strike at vulnerable internal systems. Weapons that turned an enemy's own armor into conducting material for devastating electrical attacks. Defensive systems that didn't just deflect incoming fire, but absorbed it, converted it to energy, and redirected it back at its source. Commander Vex watched in horror as his legendary death squads were systematically dismantled by human forces that seemed to anticipate every move before it was made. His warriors, bred for individual combat excellence, found themselves fighting an enemy that moved like a single organism, each unit supporting every other unit in ways that maximized effectiveness while minimizing risk. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical staff. "How do they know exactly where we're going to be?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Unit Prime 7742's mechanical voice cut through the communications chaos as the mechanoid commander shared sensor data with the Allied fleet. Analysis complete. Human tactical patterns demonstrate processing capabilities beyond current galactic standards. Probability assessment. Humans have developed artificial intelligence networks exceeding mechanoid computational capacity. The revelation hit the Allied commanders like a physical blow. If the humans possessed AI networks more advanced than the mechanoids, who were themselves artificial intelligences, then they weren't just fighting ships and weapons. They were fighting an enemy that could literally think faster than they could. Sarah watched the battle unfold through her holographic displays, her expression remaining calm even as her forces systematically destroyed a fleet that outnumbered them 40-1. To an outside observer, she might have seemed coldly calculating, but those who knew her understood the truth. She took no pleasure in the destruction, felt no satisfaction at the enemy's losses. This was simply necessity, a demonstration that had to be both overwhelming and undeniable. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 14 enemy vessels." "Accept them," Sarah replied immediately. "Transmit coordinates for surrender protocols and ensure medical aid reaches damaged ships as quickly as possible." Several of her staff exchanged glances. Even in the midst of demonstrating humanity's military superiority, their young commander insisted on following the rules of civilized warfare. Enemies who surrendered were treated with dignity, wounded were given medical care regardless of species, and civilian vessels were protected even when found in combat zones. It was perhaps the most human thing about their approach to war. They fought with devastating efficiency, but never lost sight of mercy. Within 4 hours, the largest military fleet in galactic history had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing for their lives. Of the 2,000 ships that had entered the system, fewer than 300 remained operational. The rest had been destroyed, disabled, or surrendered. The human fleet had lost exactly 0 vessels. Aboard the Worldbreaker, Admiral Karath stared at his tactical displays in numb shock. 90% of his fleet was gone. The pride of the Zinthri Empire had been swatted aside like insects. And through it all, the human child's voice echoed in his memory, calmly explaining why this outcome was inevitable. "Sir," his communications officer's voice was barely above a whisper, "we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." "Put it through," Karath said, his voice hollow with defeat. Sarah's young face appeared on the main screen, her expression serious but not unkind. Behind her, the human command bridge buzzed with efficient activity as her crew coordinated rescue operations for disabled enemy ships. "Admiral Karath," she said formally, "I'm prepared to accept your surrender." Ow! The word escaped him before he could stop it. How did a child accomplish what the greatest military minds in the galaxy said was impossible? Sarah tilted her head slightly, considering the question. "You're asking the wrong question, Admiral. The question isn't how a child could do this. The question is how humanity, a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare against its own kind, could possibly lose to anyone who hasn't." She gestured to something off-screen, and new displays appeared showing human colonies throughout the galaxy. While your species conquered primitive worlds through superior technology, humans were fighting each other with equivalent technology. We didn't win through overwhelming force. We won through innovation, adaptation, and thinking 3 steps ahead of our opponents. The displays shifted to show historical human conflicts, World War II's complex strategies, asymmetric warfare in Vietnam, the precise coordination required for modern special operations. Every human military officer studies the history of warfare on Earth. We analyze thousands of conflicts, learn from millions of tactical innovations, and understand that victory goes not to the strongest, but to the smartest. Admiral Karath's mandibles clicked slowly as understanding dawned. "You've been preparing for this since before we ever made contact." "Longer," Sarah confirmed. Humanity has been preparing for interstellar warfare since the moment we realized we weren't alone. We studied every species, analyzed every military doctrine, identified every weakness. Not because we wanted war, but because we knew it was inevitable. She paused, her young face taking on an expression of genuine sadness. Your species, all your species, made the same mistake. You assumed that because you were older, more established, more experienced in space, that you were superior. You never considered that youth might be an advantage, that a species still learning might adapt faster than species that had stopped growing. The truth of her words hit like hammer blows. The galactic powers had grown complacent, relying on established doctrines and proven technologies. They had stopped innovating because innovation was risky, and why take risks when you were already dominant? Humanity had no choice but to innovate. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outexperienced. So they became something their enemies couldn't predict or counter. They became unpredictable. What happens now? Karaf asked, dreading the answer. Now, Sarah said, her tone becoming businesslike again, we discuss terms. Humanity's territorial claims stand as presented. Your fleets will withdraw from all systems within 50 light-years of Earth. Military vessels entering human space without permission will be destroyed without warning. The Admiral's remaining pride flared briefly. And if we refuse? If we rebuild our fleets and return? Sarah's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Admiral, what you saw today was a demonstration, not an all-out assault. We use conventional weapons operating under standard rules of engagement, with strict orders to minimize casualties and accept surrenders. She paused, letting that sink in. The next time won't be a demonstration. Karaf felt a chill run through his carapace. If this had been humanity holding back. However, Sarah continued, her tone warming slightly, humanity prefers cooperation to conquest. We're prepared to offer favorable trade agreements, technological exchanges, and mutual defense pacts to any species willing to respect our sovereignty. War is expensive and wasteful. Peace is profitable for everyone. For the first time since the battle began, Karaf felt a spark of hope. Perhaps defeat didn't have to mean destruction. What guarantees do we have that humanity won't simply continue expanding once we've accepted these terms? Sarah considered the question seriously. The same guarantee you had before, our mutual self-interest. Humanity wants to explore, to learn, to grow. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to be part of it. But we also want to be respected as equals, not treated as primitives to be pushed around by established powers. She gestured again, and the displays showed human colony worlds, not military installations, but thriving civilian settlements with farms, universities, research facilities, and spaceports. Look at what we built in just 2 centuries, Admiral. Imagine what we could accomplish in cooperation rather than conflict. Humanity has innovations to share, medical technologies that could extend lifespans, agricultural techniques that could feed billions, space travel methods that could open new frontiers. The offer was tempting, Karaf had to admit. The humans had clearly developed technologies beyond current galactic standards. If they were willing to share rather than hoard. And if we agree to these terms, what happens to our military forces? Our sovereignty. Your sovereignty remains intact within your recognized borders, Sarah assured him. Your military forces remain under your command. Humanity has no interest in ruling other species. We have enough trouble governing ourselves. She smiled for the first time during the conversation, and suddenly, she looked like the child she actually was. Admiral, the galaxy is vast. There's room for all of us to grow and prosper. But there has to be mutual respect, and respect sometimes requires demonstration. Karaf looked around his damaged bridge, at the crew members who had trusted his judgment and followed him into disaster. He thought of the thousands of ships that wouldn't be returning home, the families who would mourn their losses. I'll need to consult with my government, he said finally. Of course, Sarah nodded. Take all the time you need. But Admiral, the next time we meet, I hope it's as allies rather than enemies. The transmission ended, leaving Korath alone with his thoughts and the wreckage of his preconceptions. The child was right about one thing. The galaxy was vast. Perhaps it was time to stop fighting over it and start sharing it instead. Throughout the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place as the survivors of the greatest military disaster in recorded history contacted their governments. The message was the same everywhere. Humanity was not what they seemed, war with them was suicide, and perhaps it was time to try a different approach. The age of casual galactic dominance was over. The age of human ascendancy had begun, and it had all been orchestrated by a 12-year-old girl who understood that true strength came not from the weapons you wielded, but from the intelligence that directed them. 6 months after the Battle of Tau Ceti, the galaxy looked very different. Trade routes that had been closed to human ships for centuries now welcomed them with enthusiasm. Former enemies lined up to sign technological exchange agreements. The Galactic Council, once a forum for established powers to maintain the status quo, had become a genuine diplomatic body where humanity's voice carried weight equal to species with millennia of spacefaring experience. Commander Sarah Chun stood in her new office aboard Haven Station, humanity's first diplomatic outpost in the Galactic Core. The space was deliberately designed to be welcoming rather than intimidating. Comfortable chairs arranged in conversational groups, holographic displays showing peaceful scenes from various worlds, and windows offering stunning views of the surrounding nebula. She was reviewing agricultural reports from the Kron colonies when her aide announced a visitor. "Ma'am, Admiral Korath is here for his appointment. Send him in, please." The massive Zenthri commander entered with considerably more humility than the last time they'd met. His elaborate dress uniform had been replaced by practical spacer's clothing, and his bearing suggested respect rather than barely contained hostility. "Admiral," Sarah greeted him warmly, gesturing to one of the larger chairs designed to accommodate non-human physiology. "Thank you for coming. How are the relief efforts progressing?" Korath settled into the chair with careful precision. "Better than expected, Commander. The medical supplies your people provided have been extraordinary. We've eliminated 3 plague outbreaks that had resisted treatment for decades." Sarah nodded, consulting her datapad. Dr. Martinez thought the adaptive antibiotics would work well with Zenthri physiology. She's preparing additional treatments for the remaining affected colonies. The transformation still amazed Korath. 6 months ago, this child had orchestrated the destruction of his fleet. Now, she was personally ensuring that his people received life-saving medical care. The contrast epitomized humanity's approach to former enemies, devastating in war, generous in peace. "There is something else," he said carefully. "My government has received concerning intelligence reports." Sarah's expression grew more serious. "About the Void Syndicate. They've been attacking shipping in the Outer Rim, targeting vessels carrying human technology or carrying trade goods to human colonies." Sarah leaned back in her chair, her young face thoughtful. The Void Syndicate was a collection of pirate fleets and rogue military units that had refused to accept the new galactic order. They operated from hidden bases in the empty space between star systems, striking without warning and disappearing before organized response could reach them. "How bad?" she asked. 17 attacks in the past month. They're becoming bolder, targeting larger convoys. Intelligence suggests they're being coordinated by someone with significant military experience. "Any idea who?" Korath's mandibles clicked nervously. "We believe it's Admiral Nexus, formerly of the Hegemony High Command. He was relieved of duty after questioning the decision to make peace with humanity." Sarah sighed. There had been holdouts in every government, military commanders, and political leaders who viewed accommodation with humanity as surrender rather than pragmatism. Most had eventually accepted the reality of human capabilities, but a few had chosen exile over acceptance. "What are you proposing, Admiral?" "A joint operation," Korath said, the words coming slowly. Zenthri intelligence, human tactical capabilities, and Kron warrior support. We've already approached Commander Vex, and he's interested. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Vex wants to cooperate with human forces? After seeing human small unit tactics in action, he's convinced his warriors could learn valuable techniques. Pride runs deep in Kron culture, but so does respect for proven capability. The idea had merit. Joint operations would demonstrate the benefits of cooperation while eliminating a growing threat to galactic peace. More importantly, it would show that humanity was willing to work with former enemies against mutual threats rather than simply imposing their will. What kind of timeline are we looking at? The Syndicate is planning something major, Karath replied. Our sources suggest a coordinated assault on the Meridian trade route within the next few weeks. If they succeed in shutting down that shipping lane, the economic disruption would affect dozens of systems, Sarah finished. And it would demonstrate that the new galactic order can't protect commerce. She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the peaceful stars while her mind raced through possibilities. The Meridian route was one of the busiest shipping lanes in the galaxy, connecting the industrial centers of the inner systems with the resource-rich outer colonies. Disrupting it would be both economically devastating and symbolically significant. I'll need to consult with Earth Command, she said finally, but I think we can make this work. What kind of support are you prepared to offer? Full intelligence cooperation, plus a squadron of our best ships, Karath replied immediately. We want this threat eliminated as much as you do. And Vex. 3 battle groups of death squads, plus support vessels. He's eager to test new tactical approaches. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I'll recommend approval. This could be exactly what we need to cement the new alliance structure. After Karath left, Sarah spent several hours reviewing intelligence reports and tactical assessments. The Void Syndicate represented more than just a piratical threat. They were a symbol of the old way of thinking, the belief that might made right, and that cooperation was weakness. Defeating them would require more than superior firepower. It would require demonstrating that unity was stronger than individual power. 2 weeks later, the Joint Task Force assembled in the Kepler system, a strategically located staging area that offered quick access to the Meridian route. The sight that greeted Sarah as she arrived aboard the human vessel Prometheus would have been impossible just months earlier. Zenthri ships flew in formation with human vessels, their crews working together to coordinate sensor sweeps and tactical planning. Kron warriors trained alongside human marines, learning infiltration techniques that emphasize stealth and precision over brute force. Mechanoid units provided computational support, their processing power enhanced by human quantum networking protocols. The most striking change was in the commanders themselves. Admiral Karath had shed the rigid formality of traditional Zenthri military culture, adapting his planning style to accommodate human tactical flexibility. Commander Vex had traded his ceremonial battle armor for practical combat gear, acknowledging that effective leadership required more than inspiring presence. Status report, Sarah requested as she entered the Joint Command Center. All units are in position, replied Captain Morrison, her human tactical coordinator. Zenthri intelligence has confirmed Syndicate fleet movements toward the Meridian Junction. Numbers? Approximately 60 ships of various classes, Karath answered from his station. Mix of stolen military vessels and converted civilian craft. Heavily armed but poorly coordinated. They're counting on overwhelming individual targets before help can arrive, Vex added, his deep voice carrying across the command center. Classic raider tactics, strike fast, take what you can, disappear before organized resistance arrives. Sarah studied the tactical displays showing predicted Syndicate approach routes. What they don't know is that organized resistance is already waiting for them. The plan they developed was ambitious but elegant. Rather than meeting the Syndicate fleet in direct confrontation, the Joint Task Force would use the pirates' own tactics against them. Small, fast units would harass and confuse the attackers while the main force remained hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Vex, Are your warriors ready for the infiltration mission? The Kron commander's laugh was like the rumble of distant thunder. They've been practicing human stealth techniques for 2 weeks. My death squads are eager to prove that Kron warriors can be as subtle as they are fierce. Admiral Karath, sensor coordination. Zinthri ships are linked into the human detection network, he confirmed. We'll see them coming long before they see us. Sarah nodded, then opened a communication channel to all units. All ships, this is Commander Chun. In a few hours, we're going to face an enemy that represents everything wrong with the old galactic order. The belief that strength comes from taking from others rather than building together. She paused, looking around the command center at the representatives of species that had been enemies 6 months ago. Today, we prove that cooperation is stronger than conquest. Today, we show the galaxy that the future belongs to those who unite rather than those who divide. All units, commence Operation Harmony. The Void Syndicate fleet emerged from hyperspace exactly where intelligence had predicted, their ships spreading out in a classic raider formation designed to surround and overwhelm merchant convoys. What they found instead was apparently empty space and a few lone freighters traveling the shipping lane. Admiral Nexus, commanding from his stolen Zinthri battlecruiser, smiled with predatory satisfaction. Easy targets, he announced to his mixed crew of various species united only by their rejection of the new order. Take the freighters quickly, then we'll wait for the next convoy. But as his ships moved to attack, the space around them erupted with activity. The freighters revealed themselves as disguised warships, their false hulls falling away to expose sophisticated weapon systems. Stealth ships decloaked throughout the formation, catching individual syndicate vessels in crossfire that left them unable to maneuver effectively. Most surprising of all, several syndicate ships suddenly found their own crews under attack from within as Kron warriors emerged from hiding places where they'd been concealed during what appeared to be routine cargo inspections of the last station. Nexus watched in horror as his carefully assembled fleet was systematically dismantled by tactics he'd never seen before. Ships that should have been easy targets were revealing capabilities that exceeded anything in his databases. Coordination between different species vessels was operating at levels that should have been impossible without years of joint training. How are they doing this? He demanded of his tactical officer. Unknown, sir. The human ships are using some kind of predictive targeting system. They're firing at where our ships are going to be, not where they are. And the others? The Zinthri vessels are coordinating sensor data in real time with human analysis networks. The Kron boarding parties had to have been placed weeks ago, but we never detected any infiltration. Nexus felt the cold hand of defeat settling over him. This wasn't just superior technology or better tactics. This was evidence of cooperation so deep and trust so complete that former enemies were functioning as a single, unified force. Signal retreat, he ordered reluctantly. Sir, several of our ships are reporting that their navigation systems have been compromised. They're unable to jump to hyperspace. The trap was complete. The Syndicate fleet, caught between superior firepower and disabled escape systems, had only one choice left. Nexus's communications system crackled to life with a familiar young voice. Admiral Nexus, this is Commander Chun. You're surrounded and outgunned. I'm prepared to accept your surrender. The irony wasn't lost on him. Once again, he was being offered terms by the same human child who'd humiliated the greatest military force in galactic history. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she commanded the loyalty and cooperation of the very species he'd tried to unite against humanity. What guarantees do we have? He asked, knowing his position was hopeless, but hoping for dignity in defeat. The same guarantees offered to every former enemy, Sarah replied. Fair treatment under galactic law, medical care for the wounded, and the opportunity to rejoin civilized society if you choose to abandon piracy. Nexus looked around his bridge at the crew members who'd followed him into exile. Most were looking at him with expressions of hope rather than defiance. The reality of their situation was clear to everyone. I surrender, he said simply. The cleanup operation took several more hours, but it proceeded with the same efficient cooperation that had characterized the entire mission. Wounded pirates received medical care regardless of species. Damaged ships were provided with emergency repairs. Prisoners were treated with dignity rather than vengeance. In the aftermath, as the Joint Task Force regrouped to escort captured vessels to appropriate authorities, Sarah found herself reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. 6 months ago, the idea of Zinthri, Kron, and human forces working together would have been impossible. Now it seemed natural. Commander, Admiral Karath approached her station. My government has authorized me to make a formal proposal. Sarah looked up from her reports. Oh, a permanent joint defense agreement. Zinthri intelligence, human tactical innovation, and Kron warrior strength, operating together to maintain galactic peace. Before Sarah could respond, Commander Vex joined the conversation. The Kron High Command has approved a similar proposal. My warriors have learned much from fighting alongside humans. We wish to continue this cooperation. Sarah smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with military victory. I think Earth Command would be very interested in such an arrangement. But it should be more than just military cooperation. She gestured to the tactical displays, which now showed the peaceful flow of restored commerce along the Meridian route. Joint exploration missions, shared research projects, cultural exchanges, educational programs. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us to grow together. Karatha's mandibles clicked, and what she'd learned was his species' expression of approval. A true alliance, not just a military pact. Exactly, Sarah agreed. Military force should be the last resort, not the first option. But when it's necessary, we face threats together rather than alone. Vex nodded slowly. In Kron culture, we have a saying, a warrior alone is brave, but warriors united are invincible. Humans have taught us that this applies to more than just warfare. As the Joint Task Force prepared to return to their respective bases, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching the mixed fleet of ships that represented the new galactic order. Zinthri vessels with their crystalline elegance, Kron ships built like mobile fortresses, human designs that emphasized adaptability and efficiency, all working together toward common goals. Her communication panel chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Fleet Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared on the screen, his expression mixing pride with amazement. Sarah, I've reviewed the mission reports. Outstanding work as always. But I have to ask, do you realize what you've accomplished? We eliminated a piracy threat and strengthened alliance relationships, she replied matter-of-factly. Harrison chuckled. You did a bit more than that. You've created the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization. One based on cooperation rather than dominance, mutual respect rather than fear. Sarah considered this. It's just common sense, sir. Humanity learned long ago that we accomplish more working together than fighting each other. The same principle applies on a galactic scale. Maybe, Harrison said, but it took someone with your unique perspective to make it happen. Someone young enough to see possibilities instead of limitations. Someone who understands that true strength comes from bringing out the best in others. After the call ended, Sarah remained on the observation deck, watching stars that no longer seemed distant and hostile, but full of potential for friendship and discovery. The galaxy was indeed vast, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like home, a home shared by many different species, each contributing their own strengths to build something greater than any could achieve alone. The child who had once terrified the galaxy's greatest military minds had become something even more powerful, a symbol of what was possible when beings chose cooperation over conflict, understanding over fear, and hope over hatred. The age of human ascendancy had begun not with conquest, but with the offer of partnership, and that perhaps made it truly unprecedented in galactic history. In the months and years that followed, the transformation would continue. Joint colonies where different species worked side by side to build new worlds. Research stations where human innovation combined with alien wisdom to unlock the secrets of the universe. Defense fleets where former enemies stood watched together against genuine threats to galactic peace. All of it traced back to a moment when a 12-year-old girl had stood before the galaxy's most powerful leaders and offered them a choice: evolve or be left behind. Most had chosen evolution, and the galaxy was better for it. The few who chose to cling to the old ways of dominance and conflict found themselves increasingly isolated, relics of an age when strength was measured by the ability to destroy rather than create. The future belonged to builders, not destroyers, and humanity had proven that the greatest victory was not defeating your enemies, but transforming them into allies. In the end, that was perhaps the most human achievement of all. The recognition that true power came not from standing above others, but from helping them stand beside you.